So here we are again. I'm thrilled to invite Hugette Montesinos-Rodriguez. It's just such a joy to have you, and I've been so looking forward to our conversation. Um, I'm going to share a little bit about you. I'd love to just tell everybody who you are, and then we can dive right in. So Hugette is the CEO of Disfunkshion magazine, which is a women's publication and international movement dedicated to encourage and educate on the power of resilience, mindset, and radical joy as a result of spiritual freedom. As a university educator for 5 years and a life and business coach, she worked with thousands of women worldwide, as well as spoken at conferences, retreats, and summits. And she's also the leader and founder of the Radical Woman Roadmap. So we could speak about that as well. So Hugette, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. What an honor it is to speak with you and to get to share this time.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to dive in with my first question, which is kind of a personal question for myself, which is that, one of the things, of course, that first attracted me to you and your mission is I was so taken by how beautiful and colorful you are, and how that is a part of your it's a decision. It's part of your aesthetic. It's part of your life. It's part of your creation. And it's not a small thing. It's a big thing as far as I'm concerned. And it made me think, when I was a kid, I used to wear like 3 colors of socks and match them to my earrings and match them to my rings. And then slowly, by the time I was in middle school, I was wearing earth tones. And even my mom would say, we would go shopping together, why don't you buy this beautiful color teal? You look so beautiful in teal. You look so beautiful in purple. Oh, no, I'll take the brown. And so I think is really why I wanted to start off with this question and how this is important to your life.
Sure. So color is actually a very essential part of my life. And it's something that I could also trace it back to childhood and just always being drawn and attracted and inclined to color anywhere that I would see it. And then as I started to develop a real strong interest in the science of happiness and the psychology of happiness, and I've been researching that probably for the last like 15 years or so, I started to realize the correlation between our joy levels and colors. And so part of our design is to really be inclined to color, and they actually activate certain moods and certain emotions and feelings when you walk into a room, when you walk into a space. And so I started to realize the effects of, so as I was reading and researching, I was also testing and experimenting and saying, okay, I'm going to put on these colors. Or I would always paint like an accent wall, even when I was younger. And so I started to realize that the shift was real. And when I would try to neutralize my life a little bit, especially as we start transitioning into our older years, we have to start adulting, right? And we think that part of adulting is adopting a more serious lifestyle that doesn't reflect childlike character. And then as I also started to develop in my faith life and grow a little bit closer to God, I also started to realize that a childlike character is part of our calling. And so I just started to really put all the pieces together. And not only did I have that natural inclination, but then science also proved the power and the effect of color. And then from a spiritual perspective, I realized what an important attribute this is. And so altogether, I just started saying, you know what, this is just who I am. I can never really come into that space of just doing neutrals or even just wearing all black. As much as it's chic and beautiful, it's just not me. When I put it on, I feel like something's dying inside. Yeah. Or if I'm in a space that's way too neutral within my own home, of course, I feel like there's something missing. So over the years, I just realized that I had a very big permission sign from God saying, this is very much who I designed you to be. And that's exactly what I want you to indulge in and deliciously enjoy. And so that's where my journey started.
It's stunning. I'm so glad I did ask you about that, because I had a feeling like it's not a mistake, So let's talk first, if we can, about Disfunkshion magazine and the motivation behind it and what makes it different than a typical woman's magazine.
Sure. So when it came to the idea of Disfunkshion about 10 years ago, I was finishing a master's program in Spanish literature, which had nothing to do with fashion, right? But I remember thinking I would always go and take breaks at the bookstore magazine section. So I don't know if you remember Borders back in the day. Borders no longer exists, but I would sit there and just go through magazines and I would eat them up. But part of what was interesting in my experience was sort of like a mixed emotion, because as much as I loved them aesthetically, there was always something missing. And in most of them, I felt that there was an incompleteness. So whether it was like Oprah magazine or Women's Health, they had the health element and the mental element, but then not so much of the aesthetic value that I loved. And then the fashion magazines that I loved didn't include so much of like the inner life elements. And so I remember that day saying, wow, I can envision a magazine that is completely run and it's founded on a life that you live from the inside out versus the opposite, which is what we tend to see in media, from magazines to TV shows, is you look to the outside world to then identify who you are, who you should be, how you should dress, how you should think. Well, this is a counterculture movement. And so I wanted to create a platform that allowed women to know, understand, and learn that they are exactly as they need to be, and to extract that being so that then they can do the things that they're designed to do with confidence, with joy, and with the tools necessary. So then that's where the whole idea came about. But for me, because I'm such a visual person, it needs to also be aesthetically pleasing. It needs to be delicious in order for me to actually be interested in looking at the article or looking at that page. So because I'm a little ADD in that way, I was able to merge these two worlds that were essential for me. And it seems like it caught on pretty well because a few other sisters felt the same way.
Amazing. So where is the magazine holding right now? Like, you obviously are also doing so much with the Radical Woman roadmap, and like, how does that form a part of what you're bringing to the world?
Yeah. So one of the things that would come up all the time from people that I was intersecting with in real life to the digital platforms was this question: why are you always so happy? Or how do you manage to stay joyful? And I think from an early age also, and in my research and studies in the psychology and in the happiness psychology, I started to realize that I was able to create these frameworks and think a little bit differently. And so that allowed me to then carry out this delicious life that is in spite of circumstances, not because of them. And so in developing that process, I was like, I need to share this with the world, because I would have these intersections with people and they would say, you need to write a book, or I wish you could share this with audiences of people. And so that's where the idea was planted. But this was like at least 4 or 5 years ago. And so just recently, last year, I decided to launch the Radical Woman Roadmap, because essentially living a radical life these days is pretty rare. We
Yeah.
find ourselves being dictated and swayed by culture, by standards of beauty, by standards of what fashion should look like, what a career should look like, even what success looks like. And so then I wanted to really shift, once again, counterculture mentality, and shift into a radical lifestyle where you truly and deliciously get to enjoy life in every sphere, from your mental life and overall inner life to your relational life to your career and vocation. But everything has meaning because everything's interconnected. And so basically the abundance in one area of your life doesn't make up for the scarcity or the lack in another. And so being able to live these holistic lives of purpose, of meaning, and of delicious joy, that activates us to then live out exactly what we're called to. So that's why I developed Radical Woman Roadmap.
It's amazing. By the way, I just have to say we're aligned on a lot of levels, because I also have a degree in Spanish language and literature.
Amazing. Yes, I didn't know that. So cool.
I know not many people do, but it's, well, we'll have to talk about that another time. But I feel like Spanish is the language of my soul, and it's like the literature and all of that. So okay, I already brought it up. I may as well go there. You have a beautiful background, a rich, beautiful background. I'd love for you to talk about it and how that's infused and informed you moving forward.
Sure. So do you mean background culturally or background educationally?
Oh,
Or all?
both. But I mean, I was speaking about the Spanish literature, so we could start there and then weave
Sure.
through.
Yeah, so I'm actually full Latina. I'm Cuban Venezuelan. I grew up in Venezuela most of my life. So Spanish was actually my first language. I ended up learning English when I was about 10, 11 years old. So I know I don't really have an accent. And that's one of the things people are like, how do you not have an accent? I don't even know. Because even growing up in Miami, the second third of my life, there's still sort of like that Miami accent. And for some reason, I never got it. But
Yeah.
yeah, Spanish is my first language. It's probably the language that I think in the most. It's definitely a romantic language, but that's really shaped a lot of my life and a lot of my thinking. And so even when I was growing up, that middle part of my life in Florida and Miami in particular, I was always thinking about what life in Latin America was like, what connection was like. And so much of that drove my personality, my character, my interest, and my connection with humanity. Because I think sometimes when we step more into the American way of life, it's a little bit more individualistic. And in Latin culture, as well as some other cultures around the world, we see that it's really more about community, and you grow and you actually win more when you win together. So that's really shaped a big part of me. And then upon moving to Hawaii, I felt a really strong need to connect more with my Latin culture. And so I decided to delve into a double major when I was studying psychology, and then just ended up doing a master's in Spanish as well because I loved it. And yeah, that was just important to my life.
That's amazing. Okay, well, this is just a personal question. Who's one of your favorite authors that you studied?
Oh, one of my favorites is Laura Esquivel. And it's kind of funny
Yeah,
because my mother's last name is Esquivel too. But that's not the reason I love her. But I love the old tale that I read even in high school, which is like Water for Chocolate, one of my
I mean,
favorites.
it's on my shelf. It's
Yes.
amazing. Well, it's funny that you should bring that up. I'm actually, I wasn't planning to talk to you about this, but I'm so glad I did, because Laura Esquivel, it's all about magical realism. And it's
Mhm.
almost like I know we just met, I sort of see that in your life. It's like
Mhm.
the real, but the magic, and how do we bring it together? Is that
Yes.
true? Am I-
I believe so. I think now that you mention it in that way, I would say so, because as much as life can sometimes get very mundane, and you start to see the realities that sometimes you don't want to see, it's really about infusing that magic. And I think that's where my spirituality really takes a huge role, is because spirituality and faith, particularly in my faith, it is magical. And when you're able to see that God can do things that you can't do, that God can provide things you can't provide, that it's so much about choosing to take the step and then seeing what God does with the results, it really is magic. And so it's really beautiful because you can embrace a delicious life even when you're confronted with the realism, with the realities of life. So yeah, I would say 100% I can subscribe to that.
Okay, cool. I like it. So I'd love to talk also about your daughter. We just spoke a little bit offline that we both have little girls. Um, and I just, she's somewhat new in your life, right? And
Yes.
so I'd love to hear how that's changed you, helped you grow. How do you balance it? All the questions. Motherhood, it's not
Yeah.
simple. It's not simple.
No, and I can actually say that was a pretty strong pain point for me for many years, because I was very scared to be a mom. And as much as I was always thinking that someday I would be, that someday kept passing by. And I was like, someday, someday, someday. And people would ask, so when are you going to have babies? Are you going to have babies? And I was like, yeah, someday. And I just kept waiting. And I just turned 37. So, if you really think about it, I was like waiting and waiting and waiting till who knows when. So it was one of those things where God was like, you now, this season, it's happening, right? Because we were definitely not trying, but it's
Oh,
been such an incredible, wild ride. And by wild, I mean in every way. Because if I'm very honest, in the beginning, it was very difficult. I would almost dare say a little traumatizing, because I knew that the changes were coming. I was very realistic about what motherhood would and what it would entail, what changes it would cause. I never knew quite the variety of changes, but I knew a few of them. And so I think that's why for so many years I was hesitant and was just kind of pushing it off. But it was really interesting because upon experiencing all those changes that were really difficult, like my time no longer being mine, like me not having control over my schedule anymore,
right.
or certain things fluctuating, there was also such a discovery of a space of grace. And in being able to give myself grace, to give the circumstance grace, my baby grace, all of a sudden I started to realize that even though the control factor wasn't there, the peace was there and the resilience was there. And I'll tell you, Paula, one of the most magical things that I've discovered during this season of motherhood, aside from, of course, the most incredible love that I've ever experienced before, is that I've really incorporated the word pace into my life, which is
Wow.
the tempo of a God breathed life. And while before, first of all, I think back and I'm like, what the heck did I do with all my hours before I had this baby? You're just like, what was I doing? I don't even
Right.
know.
Why was
Because
I ever tired? Like, how
I,
could I have, there was no such thing as tired.
there was no such thing. And there was no such thing as like, I'm too busy or I
Yeah.
can't. It's like, where did all that go? So
Yeah.
there's been something really beautiful and magical about understanding my limitation, but even in that limitation, I've found even more freedom. Because similar to like in the creative sphere, sometimes you think, well, the more options I have, the more creative I can be. And that's quite the opposite. Research actually shows that. So you want to take your creativity and put it in a box and say, okay, these are my boundaries for what I can create. And then when you put that boundary in there, then you discover the most authentic and most exploratory creativity ever. Well, the same thing happens here. Is I think when it came to my schedule and my sense of control, all of a sudden God said, well, this is what you've got. Now do something with it. And it's been incredible
Mm.
how much more focus there is in each thing, just because I know I can only do this one thing per day or these two things per day, work related. And the focus has been unbelievable. The redemption of the time has been unbelievable. And then I actually fly through some things because I'm 100% present instead of like operating on 5, 6, 7 different things in my mind. So it's been quite the revelatory journey. And I mean, aside from having this yummy little thing that I can't wait to come home to every day, it has been very eye-opening to really see what truly matters and what kind of life we're really designed to live, and just slowing down a little bit.
I could not agree more with what you just said. And I remember when my son was born, that idea of what you're saying about time and how time slows down and also disappears. An experience that it's hard to express. And you're right. Like when I would just lean into the rhythm of the baby or the rhythm of motherhood, it
Mhm.
flows. There's a flow to it, and it's the way we're meant to flow. And
Mhm.
it's a gift. It doesn't need to even be just mothers or just fathers that lean into that beautiful
Yeah,
power. It can be anybody that leans into that.
anybody. Yeah, and if
Yeah.
you think about it, our lives are designed cyclically. So even when it
Yes.
comes to like our menstrual periods, like there are cycles in our bodies, and these cycles are meant to communicate something. And so sometimes we just want to bulldoze through the feelings and the pain and the slowness. We're just like, no, I need to do it. No, I need to go. And in
Yeah.
reality, I feel like these cycles have been designed and created. We see that with nature and the seasons. We see that with the ocean. You know, the wave comes and it retracts, and then it comes again and retracts. And we're designed in the same way. So it's really beautiful when you're able to just start your day and be in complete surrender of, I'm going to go with the flow, and I know I'm going to find some boundaries. I'm going to create some boundaries for myself, but the majority outside those boundaries, there's going to be a lot of free flow. And there's actually a lot of freedom in that.
Um, Speaking of freedom, this has been a year and a season that has not felt so free.
Mm.
But I'd love to hear your take about some of the lessons that you've learned that you're bringing with you that have informed now your teaching to others from this very challenging year plus.
Yeah. I think one of the things that has become very clear is our need for each other. I think in the years past, it was very easy to obviate or to neglect a little bit of our need for one another, for community, for relationship. As I mentioned before, because we are such an individualistic culture in many cases. So I think it's become very obvious to us how much we actually depend on one another and how much we actually need that interaction. But second, another thing that it's really shown me is the one thing that I actually wanted to experience even before my pregnancy, which is that slowness. And it's been really interesting to see how, you know, aside from having to slow down because of being a new mom, it seems like the whole world has pretty much slowed down because of necessity. And so it's been really beautiful to see what has sprouted out of those necessities, right? And how people have really found really resourceful ways to make things work a little bit differently, but also the way in which people have internalized a little bit more of that slowness and the spirituality and the inner life, because you can't just be busy all
Mm,
the time anymore. So now you actually have to reflect. And so either people have become extra numbing, you know, when it comes to whether alcoholism or drug use or whatnot, and numbing the pain, or actually having to face it a little bit. And it seems like a lot of people are starting to face it, which I think
yeah.
is developing a lot of more inner health, so that then we can carry out, if this ever normalizes entirely again or not, the fact is we'll have much healthier souls because of it. So I think in many ways, although I'm not thankful for the pandemic and all the chaos that it's caused, I am thankful for the fact that we've all had to slow down, acknowledge, look up, and understand how finite we are.
It's so true. I mean, it is important to find the silver linings, and I do agree with you. You know, when we're confined to our homes, we have to look around at the type of home that we've built. Um,
Mhm.
this time flew by for me so quickly. Before we say goodbye, if you could just tell everyone where to find you, what projects you're working on, I mean, where they can learn more and connect with you.
Sure. So there's a few things that I want to offer. So first of all, Paula, I don't know if you might be able to share this with the folks who watch this, but I want to offer the Intentional Life Bundle, which includes
Yay.
really fun little things that I've put together. One of them is the Time and Energy Fiesta, which is really to steward your time and your energy in the best way, regardless of what season you are in life. My Radical Joy Toolkit, in which I share some things that are actually life drains, and then how to get on the joy train. And then the last one is the Delicious Life Playbook, in which you can discover and basically excavate areas of your life where you might be feeling stuck, and how to really transition into a life that you feel is really aligned and unified with your beliefs. So that's in the Intentional Life Bundle, which I'll share with you, and then you can share with the audience. But also, they can find me on Instagram. So I recently opened up a personal account, Hugette Montesinos, and then also the magazine platform, which is Dysfunkshion Mag, and as well as our website, dysfunctionmagazine.com or radicalwomanroadmap.com.
Amazing. Oh, thank you so much for the bundle. I know everyone's gonna love that. And
Yes,
thanks for the time. And I hope this isn't the last time we speak. I don't think it will be.
I don't think it'll be either.
Amazing. Thank you.